tarot cards are often the first step and basis for a seeker of metaphysical knowledge, like you, to discover your forever path. That could be astrology, numerology, healing arts, or any other spiritual interest you discover along the way. Elaine Ireland is not only a teacher of tarot, she is a mentor who supports you and will be there for you. Visit www.ElaineIrelandTarotMaster.com now and discover how Elaine's mentoring, tarot card and psychic readings, tarot card classes, and more help you to grow into the true being you are meant to be. Welcome to Conversations with the Ancients, where you're about to discover a whole different world than the one that, up until now, you've believed you're familiar with. World-renowned metaphysicist, practicing psychic and tarot teacher Elaine Ireland invites you on a journey where you'll hear voices from the past, interviews with some of the greatest metaphysicians you've never heard of, because in their time, they needed to move with stealth. You'll also meet today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who will show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Be sure you visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, hear the words of metaphysicians who blazed the trail. You're not in jail, thanks to them.
Welcome, everyone, to Conversation with the Ancients. This is Elaine Ireland, your host. Today, we have with us Adam Hommey, speaker, author, trainer, consultant, with 20 years of experience helping entrepreneurs like so many of you are, I'm sure. He's sharing with us his experiences walking into the metaphysical world. He's the person that has supported my dream of having this podcast become a reality. He and his wonderful staff are reason that we are learning together new things about spirit, metaphysics, and of course the business of sharing all of that with you. Welcome, Adam. I'm so excited that you're with us today.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I am currently sitting on my purple couch in my sumptuous apartment here in beautiful Las Vegas, known to some on some days as the hottest city in America. And in attendance are my podcast production team, Princess Alessandra Francesca and Princess Stella Juliana. For those of your listeners who may not be familiar yet, they're two domestic black cats.
And they're gorgeous. I've seen pictures. I have one popped up right now.
Yeah.
Beautiful, silky black cat. When he says production, he means P-U-R-R.
Yes.
Productions. Well, I have one. I have one mama girl who is skulking around my office trying to find a place to settle. So you may hear her shuffle around a little bit too, public. You may. You just might. One of the things that fascinated me, and I have to say surprised me, when I got your form, we do this with all of our guest public. We have them fill out a form so we know a little bit about them before we talk, is that you've spent 37 years of your life in a place you felt that you never fit. Then one morning you woke up from a dream, made a sweeping, life-changing decision based on what happened in that dream. Now, public, before we ask him what that dream was, I want you to know that Adam is the head of the company that manages and trains me to be a podcast person. So I tried for years to find a way to make this podcast happen, and it just didn't. Well, after I was connected to Adam, I realized why. I had to wait for him to be in the business, and I had to wait for him to have an understanding and an acceptance of the metaphysical world without judgment, and someone who would be curious enough to learn from us, the public, and some from me. So I can only thank Spirit for that, because I know it was Spirit managed. So what was the dream?
Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. When I say that I spent the first 37 years of my life in a place I didn't feel like I belonged, I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, a little bit south of Pittsburgh. and an area that was so rural. It was a place that Podunk calls the sticks. So the best way you can describe almost all the time I had growing up, the themes were largely loneliness and being on the outside of everything else that was going in, or going on rather. As I like to tell people, when I was up until the time I was about 3 years old, I was deaf. And then they had corrective surgery done, and I was able to hear again. Now, what happened in the meantime between me getting my hearing restored and going to kindergarten is my mother had bought some phonics books to catch me up on my ability to read and write. So I entered kindergarten able to read and write at the second grade level. So I was already advanced way beyond what they typically did in kindergarten at the time, which was filling in coloring books of pictures of dinosaurs. When I got to the first grade, they noticed I was really bored and did an assessment test on me and determined that functionally I was educationally at the third grade level, but they decided to move me to the second grade because that would have been too much of a jump. Now, they couldn't just quietly do this, like have me one day show up in the second grade classroom instead of the first grade classroom, or we couldn't move me to a different school, or we couldn't just wait out the first grade and then the next fall I just show up and all of a sudden I'm a third grader and there's really not much being said about it. They did a big ceremony of me transferring from the first grade to the second grade. So you can imagine what the next 12 years of my life were like.
Yes.
Uh-huh. So I spent a lot of time reading and studying in this little alcove of my parents' house. It was just off my bedroom. Originally, I think it was intended to serve as an attic, but it was a finished room. And I had my grandfather's desk in there and one of his chairs and his bookshelf and a whole lot of books, including a set of encyclopedias. We'll come back to that a little bit later in the conversation, but where we want to finish what's going on here is, remember, I'm out there in a place that Podunk calls the sticks, which means I wanted to have a grass cutting business, but I could only get 2 yards because that's all there was. And when I turned 16, I could not wait to get my driver's license and get a car, not so I could go partying, but so I could get a job that paid actual money. I ended up working in fast food, and that continued to be my part-time job throughout my college experience. And then what we want to do now is we want to fast forward to the first Saturday after the 4th of July in 2013. I think that was July 6th or something like that. I don't really have a calendar with me right now. And I was at the point where I had been still living in that area, and I knew that I'd kind of gone way beyond my limit there already, and I wanted to go somewhere else. I just wasn't sure where it was. Was it Las Vegas? Was it Los Angeles? Was it Phoenix? Was it Orlando? I thought of a number of different cities that interested me. And so that Friday night after the 4th of July, I had a dream, and there I was working that fast food place again. And I remembered in the dream, as it happened so often, when the general manager of the store, his name was Dennis, when he was leaving for the day, he would usually walk through the service line on his way out the door. Sometimes he'd just sort of breeze by. Sometimes he'd stop and say a few words to select people. Sometimes he'd greet everybody. Now, in my dream, he came through the line and he spent a few moments chatting with everybody except me. And now I'm thinking, okay, was this a bad day? And so just as he's opening the door to go out into the hallway to leave the restaurant, I hear him say, "Adam, I'll see you in Las Vegas."
That was a long time ago.
That was 2013. So
Yeah.
the next morning when I woke up, this is a very vivid dream. So I remembered all of it. And I'm thinking, why did he say Las Vegas? What's up with that? But regardless of anything, I hadn't really spoken with the guy in about a decade or so. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to look him up and just see what he's up to. Do you know what he was doing that morning?
No.
being buried.
Oh, no. Wow.
And the thought process that went through my mind is, here I was in this place where I never felt I belonged. I was 37 years old. And when I went to work at that restaurant, Dennis was about 37 years old. So all these threads came together that told me that this was a message to move to Las Vegas. And that very day, I set the plan in motion. And when my lease expired on my apartment, I came and drove out here.
You know, I knew you through Tracy.
Right.
And through our conversations, Tracy and I, she told me that you were moving to Vegas, but it never dawned on me to ask why.
Well, there are a number of reasons. My business brought me to Las Vegas frequently as it was, because these were the days when there were a lot of seminars and conferences in my industry. So Las Vegas was a hub for all that. Not only that, but one of my best friends and one of my top clients both lived right near LAX in Los Angeles. One lived in Marina Del Rey and the other lived in Playa Del Rey. I was also going to Phoenix a couple times a year, and I was usually hitting San Diego once or twice a year. So I looked at all these cities on the map and I realized that Las Vegas was sort of like the spoke, it was sort of like the central point in a wheel where spokes reached out to all these other cities, which were all within driving distance of Las Vegas. That, and I wasn't built for snow. And also, Las Vegas is the kind of place that everybody passes through eventually for one reason or another. I thought that I'd eventually get to meet more of these people that I only knew from online, which actually did fortuitously turn out to be the case.
Vegas is an interesting place on so many levels for metaphysicians, for psychics in particular. It's an interesting, I think of it as a three-way hub on some level. You have really brainy business people that come there to play. Then you have the possibility of play. And then you have the possibility of making yourself better than you were when you got there.
Right.
And I've spent a lot of time in Vegas too. Certainly not as much time as you have, and maybe for different reasons. I did go there as a reader. I did some psychic fairs there, which were wonderful. We had a blast. And I met internationally. I did 2 psychic fairs that were, the producers touted them as international people, and they really were, from England, from other states here in the United States, from France, from Scotland, 2 ladies from, Ireland, truly international. And we covered 3 floors, 3 mezzanines. So it was a big deal. Then you've got that spiritual energy in Vegas. If you think about Vegas's history and how it was created on greed and fun, and yet the people had to have, I read someplace in history where several of the mob people who created Vegas basically said they had a feeling. They had a feeling. They just knew. And so every time I'd go through Vegas, I couldn't help but remember that. And
Right.
for you being the entrepreneur that you have grown into over the years, and yet had this metaphysical platform to work for, you're right in there, and you're creating something wonderful, not only for yourself, but for people like me and your other clients. And yet, until I read some of this, some psychic I am, really had no sense that you were as metaphysically based as you are. And when I read it, I just went up, yeah. No wonder, no wonder you're so patient with me, because I'm a newbie at all this. You know that.
Right.
And you're teaching me how to do what you do as second nature.
Uh-huh.
But now I understand why, because you have this metaphysical platform background.
Sure.
Okay. At what point did you start to wonder if your daydreams and imagination might be something else, like interactions with a whole different universe? Now I'm going to back up for a minute. Being an outsider, as you felt, looking through the glass, it led you to see things others that didn't. So those two phrases and questions are kind of go together. What has
Right.
this meant to you? And at what point did you start wondering about your daydreams and imagination? Did that scare you at all?
Oh, not really. No. No. I guess one of the best ways I can describe this is I daydreamed a lot. In fact, I do to this very day. And part of that was the need to, I guess the best way to express this is to create a reality for myself, because in the conscious world, I didn't really feel like I had one. So I created a vision of what I wanted my life to be. And I would go into daydream mode and imagine myself actually being in it, because the conscious version was not very pleasant at all. So I think that was a piece of it. Now, as far as me wondering if these were just daydreams or if there was something else going on, for many, many, many years, I would have dreams about my paternal grandfather, my dad's dad. He died when I was 4 years old. So I didn't really know him all that well. In fact, the only conscious memory I have of him is being at his house, and he was sitting in the living room in his favorite chair watching television, and he had one of his cigars lit, and hearing him growl something and me running away. Now, I'm told that he just had a really deep voice, and I wasn't used to it. But as an adult, and particularly after I got into the entrepreneurial space, he kept appearing to me, usually in dreams, and he would keep repeating this phrase: "When the mill closed, I had to dig a ditch."
When the mill closed,
I had to dig a ditch.
What mill? Was there a mill?
Yeah, he was a foreman at that zinc mill in Denora, Pennsylvania, that caused the infamous 1948 smog.
Wow. Okay.
Uh-huh. And he worked there until it closed down, which I believe was approximately 1963. And if I'm off by a year. So he kept saying that phrase: "When the mill closed, I had to dig a ditch." And I'm thinking, is this some kind of message for me or something like that? And consciously, I figured out it was his way of saying, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I mean, that was pretty logical. But it was funny because after this has already been going on some time, my dad told me a story about after Grandpap lost his job at the mill, and before he was able to get another regular job with the Department of Transportation on construction sites, he did pretty much any odd job that came his way. And one day, my dad was walking down the street of the town where they grew up, and he looked over there. It's like, what? It was his dad digging a ditch. He had picked up a day job digging a ditch.
Wow. He was quite a teacher for you.
What's also interesting is that, and this is a test I've done a number of times, I have a picture of him that was taken right around, I think it was around 1954, 1955, when he was part of the management of that zinc mill. And he's there with about 20 other people. Now, I've shown this picture to a number of folks, and I've given absolutely no clue as to what they should look for or anything like that. And in the photo, there's really nothing outstanding about him. He just looks like one of the gentlemen there. And I would say, tell me which one's my grandfather. And in every case except maybe one or two, they found him instantly.
Energy connection.
Yeah.
Big time energy connection. I'm going to go back to your daydreaming. Daydreaming is a form of manifestation that I teach.
Yeah.
Manifesting. Some people, it works for some people, and for others it doesn't. But as you daydream and use your imagination and walk into an event like moving to Vegas, can be a powerful manifestation. Do you feel like you've done that on a conscious level or more subconsciously?
That's something I've never really thought of. I think it's probably some mixture of the two. I might need to think about percentages or what elements of which came into play. But you do raise a great point that I think while some of these steps in my journey have been the result of guidance I've received, it's all been by conscious decision.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you just a little bit.
Okay.
You knew you were moving. You went logically, Phoenix, Vegas. You did your research.
Yeah.
But you ended up in Vegas. And yet you had a boss come into your dream a long time ago that said, see you in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So how much of that do you think was a subconscious, I'm going to move to Vegas no matter what, so why am I doing the research? That would be for me, that would be the human logic side of me, allowing ourselves to say, okay, I made the decision. But
right.
I had to be able to go through and check off why I don't move to Las Vegas so that I can comfortably say, I made the decision when it was already in our path, your path,
right,
to do that. Plus the manifestation thing, if you can manifest all of this with your daydreaming, you're a very powerful spirit. So with using it in a daydream, I teach that to people who have a hard time meditating. They'll go to sleep, they can't focus. So I tell them to daydream themselves into their situation, or
right.
go to wherever they're comfortable for and sit and imagine themselves at a concert or a speaking event, and then they're learning from their subconscious. And that way they don't have to worry about staying awake. So
right.
You're very powerful if you, number one, listen to what your dreams say, and number two, you imagine and create what you want, otherwise known as manifestation. Don't undercut yourself here.
Yeah, there have been other instances that are beyond the scope of what we're discussing today, where I've had dreams about things. For example, when I got my first real job after college, and I'd been there for about 6 months, and all of a sudden, one night I had this dream about all these people that worked there who were involved in various machinations and schemes or what have you. And it wasn't point by point accurate, but there was a lot of prescience in terms of things that dream told me to look out for as I continued with that company.
Important.
So basically it was my subconscious, which had been picking up things as I walked through the halls of that place consciously every day, and it packaged them up and wrote a report for me and downloaded it to me.
I love it. You really are walking your path with great intent. You must have given yourself, before you ever came back here, or spirit gave you lessons to learn. And it seems like, so I've seen some people literally go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They don't miss a step. And then I've seen others say, okay, I don't know why, but all of a sudden I just knew I had to go back to school and get my master's. And It was like they left luggage behind, and they had to pick it up. And then they got to move on with their dreams, but they could not. They were so focused. They had to manifest that thing, whatever it was. And then all kinds of roads opened up for them. But had they stayed where they were, they would not have had that life, and they knew it, but they didn't know why. You seem to be doing the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the order.
sometimes being orderly helps.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. That is so true. So true. You've had a lot of interest as you've gone, besides your interest in reading history, cats, cigars, and 80s music. I love that.
Yeah.
NLP, that's been around for a long time. Tell people what NLP.
Neurolinguistic programming. It's basically a manner of using language and conversation to influence others is the best way to describe it. I know that sounds very straightforward. And part of what I get out of it is how we use things like phonological ambiguity, presuppositions, and other techniques to lead people to make the decisions we want them to make and have it feel like it was their own decision.
That's another form of manipulation.
Manipulation is not necessarily bad. I mean,
That's true.
you manipulate things all day long.
That's true. And the reason I wanted you to explain it is because NLP quite often is misexplained. And if it's misexplained, people automatically think, well, I don't want to be manipulated. But I agree with you. I respect NLP big time.
People crave to be manipulated.
Well, and helped. I've seen NLP with somebody who really knows what they're doing, a good technician, a well-trained and experienced NLT practitioner. I've seen them help people have wonderful lives because they help with the healing process, mentally, physically, spiritually, even. It's a wonderful thing to have as an interest and to learn about. So thank you for including that. And the novel he's been working on for 30 years. I love that. That he may finish if things slow down, and they won't, and I agree, they won't. But how do you feel about finishing the novel? Does it change periodically and you go, oh, I have to go back and rewrite this and this and that?
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like I filled a place. I've been in a place with it, particularly for the past 10 years or so, where I'm learning so much that will make it a better story when I get to that point.
Thank you for saying that. Now, I did this because I wanted you to talk about NLP and how that might help you complete your novel, but also it leads up to your experiences as a recipient of hypnotherapy, as opposed to industrial medicine therapy, and how the latter opened many doors, including solving lifelong mysteries, which can go back to your novel, and having reoccurring nightmares stop. Public, this is so important. He's written this so casually, and yet it is such an important part for those that are consciously wanting to be more aware and more open to positive, pardon my expression here, control of their growth, where they're allowing spirit to be heard and guides to be heard, but also give us the freedom of making choices. That's part of karma. That's another whole talk. So what Adam has done this unconsciously is, I think, or maybe consciously now, mix the NLP, had his experiences with hypnotherapy, which I have a lot of respect for, again, when it's handled by knowledgeable practitioners, as opposed to industrial medicine therapy. Now, that's not to say don't pay attention to Western. Absolutely. Because hypnotherapy is a Western practitioner, comes from Western practitioners, not Eastern. So there are a lot of doors to walk through here with Adam. So how did you get introduced to hypnotherapy?
How did that happen? Oh, this was maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. Is I needed to get a medical checkup that was going to involve a blood draw, and I have had trypanophobia for as long as I know, and it's a very severe type. Just the prospect of relative certainty that I'm going to have a hypodermic needle inserted into me is enough to make me pass out. So traditional methods of this never work, of dealing with this never worked. However, working with a hypnotherapist, we design guided exercises and vision exercises that I can do if I'm ever in that situation. And I can also, and what we also learn through the exercise is how to assert my rights as a patient in those situations. Like just because I'm sitting in your exam room doesn't mean you get to grab my arm and shove a needle in it without explaining to me what's going on, or running that shit by me to make sure that's okay. Because I can always just say no.
Right.
So that's where it started. And while I still have no pleasure around that sort of thing, it gives me something that I can attempt to do if and when I find myself in that situation where I'll need to go through that experience without a lot of time to mentally prepare for it.
I had a client years ago that, like you, had this fear, if you want to call it a fear, so much so that they would give him gas before they approached him with a needle.
Oh yeah. And I'm not sure if fear is the right word for it, because it's more of a physiological reaction. What happens is you go into a fight or flight response, and it cuts off the oxygen around your neck, which basically shuts down your brain and causes you to faint. That's why when you go through the experience, everything turns white and feels clammy before you fall.
Bless your heart. I'm not crazy about needles, but
yeah,
I'm able to look away and just say, okay, in fact, I had to do that yesterday. The right arm is better. It doesn't roll.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to dig for the vein. There it is.
Right.
Yeah. That's scary. But hypnotherapy, the hypnotherapy is it can be so complicated, and it has so many uses in our life that if you have any uncomfortable situations, as well as opening yourself up to spirit communication, hypnotherapy can be a wonderful method. So I'm glad that you shared that with us, because I just thought it was interesting that the NLP, things like not finishing your novel, then all of a sudden hypnotherapy was there for you. Another thing you mentioned too was solving mysteries and making reoccurring nightmares stop. That word nightmare caught my eye very quickly. And so nightmares, it's not only the reoccurring, it's why did you have the nightmares? And you certainly don't have to share that with us. But people who have nightmares, there's a reason for it. And I'm not a dream master, but know enough about dreams to know that if you don't listen to the gentle voice, every dream will get a little bit, let's say, scarier, or a little bit more attention, or the dragon gets a little bigger. It's not a pink bunny anymore. It grows up to be a dragon, until it becomes nightmares and you can't get away from the messenger. And once you pay attention to the messenger, the nightmares stop. That's one explanation. But if you have the same reoccurring nightmare, that's really getting dramatic for a lot of people, and can be a challenge to one's health.
It can take you a couple different ways. One of which is it can actually make you afraid to sleep, like happened to me when, as a child, I watched that movie, The Time Machine. And the scene where he accelerates the machine and he stops right before the nuclear war, and then you go through about I think it was like 100,000 years of him being encased in that rock. That particular scene right there would cause me endless nightmares.
How old were you then?
I don't know, maybe 8 or 9. I was pretty young.
Yeah, you were a child.
Yeah.
When children, even though some of them can be old souls, but in today's world, in this body, when children have those kinds of fears, 9 times out of 10, it can be a replay of a past life. But it can also be because in this lifetime, they don't have the skills yet. to know that they can take care of themselves,
Right.
or even how to manage a situation. So it keeps threatening them until they learn, because I look at nightmares as threats.
Yeah. And in other cases, what can happen is you start to see this recurring dream or recurring nightmare happen, and then you snap into that place where it's like, oh God, here we go with this again. And then you hope you just wake straight up, but you don't get stuck in that limbo. I can't
That's
remember
a
the
good
technical name
point.
of it, but when you're kind of awake and kind of asleep, and all the shapes around you look weird, and you know that you're conscious somewhere, and you know you need to snap out of something.
That's a good way to
I think I, th-
describe
I
it.
think I think they call it the night terrors.
Oh, then yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, with nightmare, the word nightmare in our conversation, for over 30 years, the spirit of Benito Mussolini kept showing up, repeating a phrase over and over. What the phrase meant, why he showed up when he did, and what caused him to finally go home. I read Benito Mussolini and went, oh, crap. That's a nightmare within itself. Even if he
Well,
just came
well,
to say happy birthday.
not necessarily, and that's part of the point we're going to get to in a moment when I tell this story. Now, I find it very interesting that without any preamble or even any coaching on my part, you brought together the concept of recurring nightmares, spiritual visits from dead dictators, and seeing things in the conscious world that are actually spiritual connections in a way that even I didn't anticipate that you would, which speaks to your brilliance and perceptiveness in this whole thing. So let's go back. So let's go back to that little alcove where I had my library and my encyclopedias. And one night I was sitting up there and I was reading something as usual, and I started to hear heavy breathing. So at first I thought it was our Shih Tzu Chang, because
Ooh.
sometimes that old dog would find his way up the steps and find his way into that room. And it's like I'm looking around for Chang because I'm hearing that. but I but I look up and it's like I see this I see this man who's about 5'6", wearing a green uniform with a prominent jaw and a shaven head. It's like, are you who you think? Wait, are you? And then he said in English with this heavily accented, heavy Italian accent with his English, he said essentially, make sure they know I tried to stop it. Do everything you can to make sure they know the truth.
Wow.
And and then I said, what do you? Poof, he was gone. Now I'm thinking maybe I'm just really up too late reading this stuff. I don't know. We're starting to affect what I'm seeing around. And I checked again just to make sure Chang wasn't hiding around the corner or something, looking for a milk bone or something. But but this but this would keep happening, not according to a specific pattern. Although I later discovered that there was a consistency where Mussolini would keep showing up and it'd say substantially the same thing. And it was make sure they know I tried to stop it. Make sure they know what really happened. Make sure they know the truth. And then he would walk off again. Now, I also, as a young man, began bringing in the concept of nightmares. I would have nightmares that I would be someplace, it didn't matter where. But then all of a sudden, I would be in the really old building where I went to kindergarten, which in the conscious world is basically an abandoned building, except they used the basement of it for a bus garage. It was one of those cases. It was one of those cases in the 1980s where they were consolidating schools, and they just kind of abandoned the buildings and they had the most asbestos in them. So that was the one that they left behind, but they carved out the basement of it as the bus garage. But I would find myself having these And it usually was kind of a nightmare scenario of being in the upper floors of it, which is a very, very old building, like going back almost to the turn of the 20th century. Now, fast forward to the late spring of 2014, and this is about 8 or 9 months after I moved to Las Vegas. I had acquired a girlfriend back in Pittsburgh before I came out here, and she was supposed to move out a few months after I did. Well, without getting into any detail, there, it ended in a breakup, and it wasn't a very pleasant one. So I thought, okay, this is kind of really stressing me out here. Not because I'm actually feeling a lot of regret over this. For some weird reason, I'm feeling relief over it. But because this, if she decides to go nuts on me, this could become a major piece of drama in my life, and I might have to do something drastic to shut it down. That's what my thought process was. So I went to hypnotherapy.
Okay.
And I basically told my hypnotherapist the story just as I told you. And really with just that much detail, not a whole lot of detail to it. So they put me under and everything. And next thing you know, they're taking me through a series of mazes where a theme that emerges is that, and it started in an old shack that used to be up on the hill behind my grandparents' house. Then it moved to that elementary school. But I'd find myself in some decrepit old room, and there would always be a lamp with a little pull cord on it, like a little metal cord you'd pull to turn it on. And whenever I pulled the cord, all the decrepitness would go away, and it would become a beautiful room or a beautiful space. So the next thing, I find myself in Benito Mussolini's office in the Palazzo Venezia, which for those of you who may study this area of history know that his office was literally a ballroom. I mean, that was just a manifestation of his personality. He used an actual ballroom for his day-to-day office. And so I'm there in the far left corner where his desk was, sitting on top of the ornate Persian rug. And he's on a telephone call, standing up behind the desk, and he seems really frustrated about something. And I'm waving to him, trying to get eye contact with him, and I just can't seem to get his attention. So then the hypnotherapist says, is there a lamp on his desk? And it turns out, and this is actually how it went down in history, there was a giant chandelier lamp with a pull cord on his desk. So I pulled the cord. And as soon as I did that, he looked up and then raised his finger as if to say, one moment. And then after the call ended, he leaned forward on the desk, shrugged his shoulders, bowed his head, and then looked up at me, and he said, with that same accent that I was used to hearing, he said, make sure they know I tried to stop it. Make sure they know the truth.
Were his eyes the right color as they were?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The vision was pretty true to what he actually looked like in the conscious world. And so then my hypnotherapist guided me through the exercise to walk behind his desk, pick up the telephone he had been using, and call back the person he'd been speaking with, which I did. And then they asked me, what are you saying? And I said, well, it's in Italian, so I don't know the exact words, but I'm telling them to never mind what I just said and to move forward anyway. And we have to do it. The peace of the world depends on it. I'll deal with the League of Nations. Your job is to carry out my orders. And then the next thing I knew, I saw a map of Austria and Germany. with a blue wave starting at the bottom that started with the southern Austrian border and go up just above Munich.
I have to ask this. Is that what brought your attention and interest to alternative history scenarios?
There is actually an alternative history scenario I have that accounts what would have happened if Mussolini had joined the Allies instead of the Axis. But I've had an interest in alternative history for well nigh many years. So to cut to the chase so this doesn't get too long, here's the truth that I'm supposed to make sure people know. In July of 1934, Hitler's regime, which was very new in Germany, attempted a coup in Austria to take over Austria. This was 4 years before the Anschluss. And as part of their coup, they assassinated the chancellor, Engelbert Dollfuss. Dollfuss was a friend and ally of Mussolini's, which set off the Duce, who already actually didn't like Hitler. And not only that, but when you bring it down to a human perspective, at the time this happened, Dollfuss's wife and children were the guests of Mussolini's family at the Villa Torlonia. So, in addition to having to deal with an international crisis unfolding on his border, he had grieving widows and children right in his house. You can imagine, all this shit going on, I got to invade somebody. So Mussolini approached what we would later think of as some of the allies, such as the British and the French. And he said, we got to do something about Hitler. Yeah, I don't think you guys understand how evil this guy is. So I'm willing to take him out. All I need you to do is not ask a whole lot of questions, and I may need you to pay an invoice. They did not agree to that. A little bit later on, maybe 6 months later, Mussolini attempted to create an alliance against Germany. It was called the Stresa Front. That's spelled Stresa, which involved the British, the French, the Italians, and I think one other country, which lasted for a very short period of time before the British and the French made their own deals to appease Hitler. So what we are discovering here is that when you first said Mussolini's name, when you asked that question about 15 minutes ago, you said, oh, well, that's a nightmare right there. That's because you've been told that he was a thoroughly evil individual.
Yes.
Because he was on the opposite side during the last war that we actually declared against other countries, World War II. So the propaganda that has passed through the books and the stories over time features a deranged lunatic who stood on balconies and screamed at the sky. It doesn't mention that part before 1935, where he was viewed by many as a man of destiny. And he actually was admired by pretty much anybody who wasn't a communist. And so
you have a connection to him, don't you?
And so I'll get to that. And so the truth that he wants me to share wanted me to share in those cases, was to make sure they knew that he actually took measures to try and nip that whole thing in the bud before it got started, but found no cooperation with other countries he reached out to for help. And that's documented historical fact. You can check it yourself.
With this conversation, there's another, no, you use it as a question. I'm going to state it as a statement.
Yeah.
You said, beyond what we read in books and see in documentaries, how history itself is a living message to us. And you question that. You have a question mark. I
Yeah.
have to make it as a flat statement
Uh-huh.
based on what you shared with us about Mussolini.
Right. Well, let me finish the story of him and how we made him go home. So
Okay.
after that hypnotherapy session, he never appeared to me again, except in one case. So there were no more visions where I'd be sitting there reading a book or walking along, and all of a sudden he'd be there begging me to tell the world what really happened. That same night, I had a dream, and I was watching a news interview that was obviously from the 1950s. You could tell by the film quality, the sound quality, and everything else. And it depicted Mussolini sitting in a really big chair. He was very old, and he was wearing a very nicely tailored suit, which would indicate that there was a universe in which he did not end up getting executed and hung from a meat hook. And I only remember one piece of the interview, and I think this is where we were going with this. And I'll share the actual lesson that was being imparted to me from the spirit world in one moment. Is the interviewer said, "What do you say to those people when you invaded Germany in 1934 that you burned down villages and you murdered 35,000 German soldiers?" And in that same heavily accented English, he said, "Don't you understand? I saved 35 million people. Did you read that guy's book? Do you know what he was planning?" And then I woke up.
And Mussolini has not reappeared to you since then.
No, but here's the message he was trying to share. I went back and thought as much as I could about all the experiences I'd had with that same message being delivered to me. And what the meaning of it was is that there are times where you're going to be in situations where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And you're going to have to do it one way or another. And in those cases, your true supporters, your true friends will stand with you even if they disagree with you. That you don't serve yourself by backing down from having to make tough decisions that may be unpleasant for others at times.
He certainly was in that position.
Yeah.
Now that I think back on what I have read that was positive of him, he seemed to find balance, or tried to find balance. Now remember, so many of those things are written from an outsider looking in. They're
right.
written from his journals, or that his voice, not written in his voice. So people can, and he's not the only one, other leaders as well. We make assumptions and write it and teach it when, as you say, it's not always a truth.
Right.
I put these words in your mouth. I apologize. But
no, not all.
You've had experience with this person in dream form, which is very powerful. This is, I mentioned your connection with him a minute ago, and there's a trust that comes from his side, and he sought you out to share his, I tried to stop it.
Yeah. Now, it was explained to me by somebody else who you and I both know, actually, that what could be happening here is because there was that yin and yang. There was both the good side and the bad side of him, that when he did die, that he was judged as being potentially redeemable. However, he would need to go through a karmic journey in what we may call purgatory, where part of his debt that he needs to pay off before a final decision is made about him is to seek out people who are dealing with tough situations and deliver that message so that they can discover for themselves that not everything is easy in the world. And sometimes you are going to have to make decisions that are going to adversely affect other people, or they're going to put you in what may seem like a negative light. And that's just part of life.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's one way lessons are learned the best, is living the results.
Right.
Viewing and living, experiencing the results. Even if you don't always get the message, then you will. First, you have to see it. You have to observe what's going on. But going back to, yes, you may have been a random person, but I doubt seriously that you were random to receive this message. Number one, because of the business you've gone into.
Yeah.
You're a communicator. You wouldn't have been having this conversation on the platform with me about him in this way, and about karma, and experiencing alternative history scenarios, NLP. We've brought in a lot of methodologies. He knew on some level that you would have that opportunity to continue to carry his message.
Yeah.
So there has to be a connection, not only an observation from one spirit to another, but a connection of trust. He dropped this in your lap a long time ago, and you're continuing over every 10 years, and you will probably continue until you pass away.
Well, let's go back to the first time he dropped it in my lap. What was I going through then? We discussed at the very beginning. I was in a place where I didn't feel like I fit in. I was in a place where I was treated very poorly by my classmates. And if I understood the message at the time, it could have been interpreted as, yeah, you know what? You're just going to have to knock somebody's head off. You're going to have to bust somebody's nose. Yeah, people are going to call you a bully. They're going to call you an ass. They're going to threaten you and all that. And your parents are going to say, "Oh my God, how could you get in a fight?" and all this other stuff. But the fact is, you got to do it.
And you did.
No, I didn't.
You may not have punched somebody in the nose, but you're a verbalist. You're a communicator.
No, in those days, I pretty much shrunk in the corner.
Really?
No, it took a while for that message to get through. I'm just saying, if I understood the message the first time, when you look at the timing of its arrival, that's what it likely would have applied to.
You have a lot of strength, internal and otherwise. And you have a wonderful way of balancing your spiritual energy and methodology and communication methodology with your logic and your intellect. And that's not all corporate leaders have that. And you do. And with that, you're building a business based on that.
Right.
And teaching others how to do it as well. Which and I don't mean to leave Mussolini here, but
we can leave him at any time. We sent him home 11 years ago.
Okay. So
yeah.
What is REACH? REACH with a period.
Now you want to refer to my business. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, REACH is an acronym that was developed a number of years ago. What I needed to the convenient way of describing the power of podcasting. The original acronym was REACT, but it became REACH. So the R stands for, it has a triple meaning: represent, reinvent, and reverberate your business and brand. The E stands for engage. Engage your ideal prospects, clients, customers, and business allies. The A, achieve greater presence and make a difference. The C, close more deals and create. So close and create, double meaning, the business and lifestyle you deserve. And the H also has a double meaning: harmonize with your market and become the hunted, not the hunter.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Now, with that in mind, you have written books. And I think we need to say the names of those books.
Well, I've written one and I've contributed to another.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah.
Your contribution is important. You wouldn't you would not have been asked if it was not important.
Right.
Groundhog Day is an event, comma, not a business tragedy.
Right.
Strategy.
Yes.
Thank you. And you were the contributing author to Journeys to Success, the Millennial Edition.
Yeah.
Both of them are international Amazon bestsellers.
Well, they were, but that was many years ago. This is during the days of Pump and Dump, but yeah, I got the badges for both of them.
You're good. The fact that you host your own podcast, you teach business creation, communication skills, which we're all about with podcasts. You've spoken. People can find you as a guest on other podcasts and stages around the country for many years. So you have a voice out there, and you've backed it up with action and success. People can write books, but if you're not teaching or they're providing some other form of enjoyment or knowledge, why write the book? And you've backed it up with success and helped other people be successful. Why did you read Out of the Night by Jan Valtin? Valtin? What's in there?
Valtin.
Valtin.
Out of the Night by Jan Valtin was a book. It was a number one bestseller in our country for like a week in, I think, 1940 or 1941. It is the autobiographical memoir of a German communist who was captured and imprisoned by the Nazis. And in order to get out of the concentration camps, pretended to convert to the Nazi cause.
Okay.
And then he ultimately ended up escaping and ended up in the United States. And he wrote this memoir when he was essentially on the verge of death and with absolutely no notes or anything to go by. So this was my grandmother's favorite book for some reason. I remembered when I would visit my grandmother's house, it was up in her attic where that bookshelf was. And I would go up there and I would read through this book. It took a while because it's almost 800 pages, but I eventually got through the whole thing. And I've read it a few more times over the years and had different perspectives on it because I come at it from different levels of knowledge. But when we look at the importance of how history delivers us a living message, if you read this book, you're going to find so many similarities and parallels to what we see going on with our geopolitics, our economy, ideological philosophies today. In fact, it's uncanny how similar things are to what you see in the news.
I have to say, what we don't learn the first time, the lessons we don't learn the first time will come back around.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example from the book. Now, you may have heard somewhere along the line people claiming that in this country, Antifa is not an organization, it's a spontaneous movement. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
It is not spontaneous. It is not a grassroots movement. It is an organization. There is no identified leader or supreme council or anything like that. But if you notice, they have a flag. If you notice, they have a logo.
Yes.
They use the same logo as the pre-war German Communist Party. And as far as how they can be an organization without having a visible organization where they all seem to know when to show up for the demonstrations and the protests and all have the neatly printed signs. If you read Out of the Night, it's laid out for you in complete detail how an underground organization where you have cells of activists, usually cells of 8 people or less, who don't know who are in the other cells or what the other cells are, can nevertheless all come together at the same time for the same purpose. It's all laid out exactly how it works.
Which is kind of scary.
Well, you can look at it as scary. You can also look at it as informative and
Yes.
understand it when you read beyond narratives, which are often designed to serve an ideological purpose, and you look toward facts, you can see that more than one thing can be quote unquote true at the same time.
That's important. More than one thing can be true at the same time. And I have to say, I've seen that. I'm an old woman, so I've seen
Yeah.
that more than once in just about on every level, be it government, business, emotions, ethical decisions to be made. It goes back to that somebody's going to get hurt no matter how it goes, one way or the other. Somebody's going to suffer to some level.
Think of it as something like this. 3 quarters in a row, revenues are way down. We have to make some cutbacks. Unfortunately, some people are going to be negatively affected because they're going to be laid off, but I have to do this to save the company.
Right.
That would be an example I think most of us can see.
And unfortunately, that's happening right now.
Yeah.
When has it ever stopped happening? I have to back up. That decision probably is made by somebody every day in business. I don't care if you work out of your home. I see it on Facebook with smaller companies saying, I'm sorry, I'm having to shut this down.
Yeah.
Every day I see it. All the way up to people like IBM and other companies laying off people, saying, when everything settles back, hopefully your position I can rehire. Well, by then they've found another job or gone on or whatever. Some go back.
Right.
But that decision is made, I would say, every day by someone.
Yeah, it's very sad. I mean, but I think it's just, and I also think it's part of the evolutionary process. Sometimes people do need to move on.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I've heard so many clients say, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
I would not have moved to Vegas. I would
Right.
not have met so and so. And it's usually part of the journey that we've set up for ourselves. But when it does happen, it can be very painful and it can be scary. And it can be people not working for a year or two before they have a different kind of paycheck coming in.
Yeah.
But while they're doing that, they may go back to school or start some little something on the side and they survive.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, surviving is not satisfactory. Just surviving, as one lady said not long ago, is not really okay with me. And of course, she came from a job that was huge amount of money every year. But anyway, everything happens for a reason. Public, everything happens for a reason. We just sometimes have to figure out what that is on the go, as they say.
Yeah, that's right.
On the go. I'm glad that you're working and living in Vegas. You've created quite a life for yourself there that you're sharing with the people on your team, which, by the way, public, his team is fabulous. They're wonderful.
Yeah, they keep me in line.
Oh, well, I really don't know how many people are on your team, and I don't need to know. I just know that everything is in perfect order, and they're very patient. They're professional. They get things done, and they put up with newbies like me with patience and with understanding. And I learned something from every mistake I make, and will probably make more because I'm in the learning process. But thank you so much for being, folks. I cannot tell you how many times I tried to get a podcast going like this one. And we have another project in the making, which will probably take months to get together, but little by little, it will be presented to the public. It's a learning website. It's a little more complicated than this podcast, but the podcast I'm having so much fun with it. I'm probably driving his people crazy, but I'm having fun with it. But I had to wait until Adam was created what he has, because frankly, public, not everybody wanted to do a podcast with a metaphysician. And at the beginning of podcast, we had to do it on our own. There was not a company out there to do it. I've had three radio shows in my lifetime. That was another form of a podcast, and had fun with it. Loved doing every one of them. And they tried to give us support in every way they could. But podcast is different, and especially when you're trying to have people come in and talk to you and trust you with their world and their business, whatever it might be. And metaphysicians had a hard time getting people to accept and support. So I didn't do one, but I kept a lot of records that Adam and I have been able to use. Meanwhile, I had the radio shows, which trained me to some degree. I learned a little bit, and I carried it over. But Adam and his people have adopted me. I feel like I've been adopted, and I have full support, and I cannot thank him enough for the time that he has put in, the energy, his patience with me. He and his group are wonderful. So if you need somebody to create and help you get your stories and your knowledge out there, Adam Hommey is the one to call. Saying that, tell these people how they can reach you.
Yeah, if you're listening to this show and you want a conversation with me, just go to www.schedulewithadam.com. It's real simple.
Absolutely. And if you do that, if you mention his appearance on Conversation with the Ancients, he'll gift you with a call.
Yeah.
Which he has a lot to share. So if you can get him on a call, even for 15 to 30 minutes, you will learn a lot, folks. So it is well worth that. Business person, I don't care what arena you're in. He may, I've said that. Those are not his words, but I know he sponsors and takes care of other subjects besides metaphysics. So whatever you're trying to do, it is worth reaching out to him to see how he could be of service to you as a podcast creator, which he definitely is. Anything else you want to share with us?
No, I think this is pretty much all of it. And it's not nearly often enough I get to have these interesting chats about my live conversations with dead people.
Tell us more about that. That's right. That's Mussolini, among others, your grandfather. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, I have a metaphysical friend who, unfortunately, her health is keeping her away from teaching and such, but she used to wear she's a metaphysician, a psychic, a tarot reader, a healer, a teacher. She's written several books. Her name is Linda Drake, and been around for a long time. And her husband, well, when people would ask her what she really does, she just smile and say, I talk to dead people. And basically that's where her business kind of rounded out. And her husband had her made one of these brass things that you wear on your, it's usually a name and what you do, boss or whatever. But he had this brass identifier made, and it had the initials ISTDP, Linda Drake, and a period behind each one. So of course people would stop and say, what is that? What does it mean? I speak to dead people. And I'm so sorry that her health has gotten in the way of her continuing to do as much of that as she loves doing. But when you said you speak to dead people, you probably do more than you think you do.
I think a lot of us do without realizing it, because I think for some of us, maybe it doesn't manifest as consciously as a specific human being or a specific being in general, or they may dismiss it because, that's just ghost stories.
Ghost. The word ghost it's a fun word, but it can be a scary word, but it's very appropriate for the way we can close out our conversation today, because we do both of us speak to dead people on different levels for different reasons. And yes, there's a spirit, a ghost energy there, but, and they meld together. And some people only know spirit as a ghost. They don't separate the two. when in reality, they are one and the same. Perhaps just with a different physical appearance, like your grandfather was so vivid and Mussolini was so vivid to you. It takes a lot of energy for spirit to appear. So sometimes a ghost is thought of being something that floats in the air and you can see through them and poof, they're on. But that's still a spirit.
Right.
And it takes a lot of energy for them to allow us to see them, no matter how dense or what kind of conversation. That's why so many spirits come to us in dream form. It takes energy. Meditation, we have to float up. They have to come down to meet us. It's still a ghost.
Yep.
However you want to recognize it, do it comfortably. And please, public, accept the messages they have to say, even if you don't understand them. Like Adam did as a young boy, he heard them and he remembered them and he respected them. So they kept coming back to help him in all kinds of ways possible. Just like you came today to help me share you to our public. And I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Elaine, and anything I can do to help.
Thank you. Come back again. Someday we'll pick a subject and tear it apart. How about that?
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into The Conversations with the Ancients, where we take you on a journey where you'll hear voices of metaphysicians from the past, as well as today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Remember to visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with the Ancients.